Merry, Merry Christmas Eve, and good evening. I am the Reverend Lynn Gardner. My pronouns are she and they, and I serve as co-minister of this congregation alongside the Reverend Wendy Bartel. Please use Wendy's name rather than pronouns. This Unitarian Universalist faith recognizes that there are many paths to truth, and that it is one of our guiding principles to engage in a responsible search for truth and meaning. We are so glad that your journey has brought you here tonight. We know that there are lots of things that draw people to a Christmas Eve service. Some of you are members and friends and visitors and seekers of this congregation, and you wouldn't miss an opportunity to be together, either here or in the magic of the Zoom sanctuary. Hello, all of y'all out there. Some of you were brought or cajoled to attend, maybe dragged by some others. Some of you are here because it's Christmas Eve, and so your internal clock says, time to go to church. Some of you maybe aren't exactly sure why you're here, and yet here you are. For all this and more, we are so grateful that you are here. We come together on this wondrous night to consider our faith, to contemplate an ancient birth story and our place in the ongoing and ever unfolding story of existence, to sing new and familiar songs, to listen for the wisdom in the darkness together, and to see what gifts arise.
Unitarian Universalism recognizes that there are many sources of truth that can be found in most of the world's religions, philosophies, and practices, including science and history. A couple of weeks ago, we honored Hanukkah. This past Sunday, we acknowledged Las Posadas, Advent, and Bodhi Day, and we celebrated the winter solstice this past Sunday. Tonight, we pay particular attention to the Christian scriptures in the story of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, and consider how this story informs our faith in 2023 on the cusp of 2024. Tonight we explore how the birth story and baby heralded by angels celebrated on this night inspired the wise ones and the shepherds, poets and songwriters to bear witness to the beauty, the blessings, and the miracle that surround us every moment. This month of December, we have been exploring the theme of unexpected gifts. And in this season of darkness and light, we actively strive to interrupt the racist attitude that light is superior to dark, because we know that we need both. The dark and the light are both sacred and necessary for life to exist. As we prepare ourselves for the mystery and wonder, the singing and the silence, let us now take a moment to receive the gift of our next breath. This breath that is so precious and not ever guaranteed. Being mindful of the gift that it is to be together as well. Perhaps as we carry through with our service, we might be listening for angels or ancestors, the cry of a baby, or our own heart's longing. And when we can, to repeat the sounding joy so that all who are in need of it may hear it. With gratitude to Rosie Lewis reading our scripture, and for our choir and musicians for helping set the context for our evening together. So many of us know this story, whether through religious teachings or through just existing in many cultures. Edmund Hamilton Sears, who we mentioned earlier, the minister who composed It Came Upon the Midnight Clear, originally wrote 5 verses to that song. Now, in the language of his time, it was woefully sexist, so when the Hymnal Commission created our Gray Hymnal in 1993, they updated many of the lines so they would be more inclusive. But I was really curious to know why it only had 4 verses instead of 5. The 4th verse goes like this: "And ye, beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow, Look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. O rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. Now, the text was first published in the Christian Register on the 29th of December in 1849. Now, perhaps you know this, but this was news to me. Those of you who are members of this or another UU congregation, thanks to contributions to the annual program fund, we receive a magazine called UU World, published by the Unitarian Universalist Association. The UU World was first known as the Christian Register. From 1821 until 1957, it was known as the leading Unitarian weekly published by the American Unitarian Association. By 1957, both the Faith and the magazine were becoming less focused on Christianity, and it was changed to the Unitarian Register. And in 1961, the same year this building was completed, the journal merged, along with the denominations, with the Universalist leader, which first came into being back in 1819. So as an interesting side trip down UU World origin lane digression, that aside, why was this verse that acknowledges hardship and encourages a time to pause and listen left out? Well, I wondered if it might be maybe because the language is a bit ableist. And so I decided to try writing to Reverend Marco Bellatini, who was the chair of the 1993 Hymnal Commission, and ask him. And amazingly, he wrote right back. There were two reasons, he said. The verse assumes an able-bodiedness, and they had real page and size limitations to contend with. This English language can be so tricky sometimes. We don't want to leave anyone out. And we use language describing things bodies can do, while we know that not all bodies can do those things. I am moved that they opted to not include it because they wanted to be more inclusive. And because sometimes two things can be true at once, I am moved that a minister in 1849 wanted to include the downtrodden or those who are struggling in a hymn about Christmas. An encouragement to take care of oneself, to pause from all the work, the toil, and listen. And in our current context, I'm moved by that compassion of witnessing one another, those of us who find ourselves beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are sometimes bending low. There are people throughout time and those in this room who have been crushed by grief and loss. For if we dare to love, we most certainly will also experience grief. There are people throughout time and in this room who have bared the crushing weight of oppression and discrimination. This song was published just after the Mexican-American War and before the Emancipation Proclamation. We can imagine that Edmund Sears could have been talking about a lot of different people when he names the forms bending low with toil. Now, we tend to speak of the joy at this season. It's the most wonderful time of the year, right? Fa-la-la-la-la and all that. But there is also Scrooge and the Grinch and Blue Christmas. There are people we miss, or places, or traditions. There's the nostalgic longing for what used to be, which may or may not ever actually have been. All sometimes jumbles in together.
When a loss has been particularly painful, grief lasts a long time, often longer than others have patience for. The poet Gwen Flowers writes of grief this way: I had my own idea of grief. I thought it was the sad time that followed the death of someone you love, and you had to push through it to get to the other side. I am learning there is no other side. There is no pushing through anything, but rather an absorption, adjustment, and acceptance. Grief is not something you complete, but rather endure. Grief is not a task to finish and move on, but an element of yourself, an alteration of your being, a new way of seeing and a new definition of self. You may have noticed that we have some blue ornaments tonight. Some are mixed in with others, tumbling, as grief often does, with joy. And some are hanging on the outside, just lingering on the edge of our awareness and still present. This week, our dear friend and local colleague, the Reverend Sarah Barron, lent us some of the costumes for the Christmas pageant we held here this morning, because they won't use them until tomorrow. This week, she and others also shared a Facebook post from a relationship enhancement specialist named Shaniqua Mayoshi Smith, who wrote a bit about holiday host etiquette. In that post, she wrote, "If you're inviting someone to your home and they're grieving, be sure that you're inviting their grief to attend too. It will be there anyway. Don't invite someone with the goal of cheering them up for the holidays. Don't expect them to put on a happy face in your home. Don't demand they fake it till they make it, or do something that they don't want to do either. Invite them with the loving intention of offering cheer and companionship and unconditional care during the holidays. To do this, you will need to honor and be responsive to their needs and emotions. You might do this," she suggests, "by privately acknowledging their grief when you make the invitation. For example, I know this season is extra hard and your heart is hurting. You and your grief are welcome in our home. Come as you are. We'd be honored to have you with us." It's also incredibly loving to honor the reality that it's often hard for grieving folks to know what they will want or need or be up for or be able to tolerate at all during the holidays. Giving them an invite without the need for commitment and permission to change their mind is extra loving. Another example of how to do this: you don't have to decide right now. If it feels good to be with us, we'll have plenty of food and love for you. Just show up. I'll check in the day before if you're feeling up to coming over, and if there's anything you'd like me to know about how we can support you. Your grieving friends and family need attentive care and responsiveness at the holidays, not plans to keep them busy, distracted, and happy. She concludes, if they're laughing, laugh with them. If they're weeping, ask if they'd like your company or your help finding a quiet place to snuggle up a while to be alone. If they're laughing while weeping, and this is more common than you'd think, stay with them. This is a precious moment of the human experience that is truly sacred. We don't need to protect ourselves or each other from grief at the holidays. In fact, the more we embrace grief as an honored holiday guest, the more healthy, happy, and whole our holidays will be.
There are many reasons to be grieving right now. Yes, personal ones, global ones. You could probably name a few, maybe several right now. Many of us are actually grieving, and we too need attentive care and responsiveness. The post was, about other folks and the folks who aren't grieving, what to do for it, but many of us are grieving. So if that is you and your grief are welcome here. We know a lot of you have had some very significant losses in the last year. or two. And we as a species have had an unbearable number of losses in the last few. You and your grief are welcome here. You might be wondering, why are we talking so much about grief on this wondrous night when we anticipate the birth of a baby, opening presents, and sharing festive meals and time with loved ones? Well, because Edmund Hamilton Sears wrote, "It came upon the midnight clear" during a time he was experiencing a mental health crisis. He was experiencing that crisis from exhaustion in the ministry, and as a pacifist, his contempt for the Mexican-American War. Because we are in the middle of a global pandemic still, and there are folks online who aren't here in this room who want to be. Because our democracy is in peril and fascism is in our midst. Because our earth is giving humans a very loud message that many of our behaviors are creating chaotic climate change. Because the terror and violence that shook the people of Israel on October 7th and the ensuing war that has resulted in over 20,000 Palestinian deaths and devastating conditions for the survivors. Even as Israeli and other families are still waiting for their loved ones to be released and returned home. Whether we talk about these things or not on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or any other day, they are still happening. Whether we talk about them or not, they are still affecting us. Besides, Christmas can take it.
Our dear colleague, the Reverend Kendall Gibbons, wrote, "One of the great things about Christmas is that it is a sturdy holiday. Christmas doesn't wimp out when times are hard. It comes anyway, even if there are hardly any presents, even when there isn't much food to make a feast with, even if you're sad, even if the world around you is at war, even if you are living in fear and danger and oppression, Christmas still comes. And when it comes, Christmas is subversive. Christmas, with its story of an unwed mother and a doubtful father, with its legend of a helpless baby born in a stable who was worshipped by some of the wisest, richest men in the world, with its tale of the child pursued by the deadly wrath of kings who escaped as a refugee to a foreign land far from home. Gibbons continues, Christmas, with its ancient, enduring summons of peace on earth, goodwill to all people everywhere. You can't stop a day like that with a little hardship or greed or injustice. It will show up anyway, shining the light of a midnight star into the darkest places of our collective lives. Do not underestimate the power of the manger and the hope it holds, she says. The Christmas song of the angels is not as innocent as it sounds. It has turned the world upside down before now. It still can. And this, my dear people, is why this ancient story still matters today. We can change the trajectory of our lives, of our nation, of our world with the unexpected gift that hope brings from gathering together to sing and ponder and grieve and light candles and contemplate the mystery and wonder in the dark about how our lives might bring more peace, more justice, more liberation to all beings. We each have a part in this sacred story, regardless of our beliefs about whether Jesus was a man or a Messiah, because it matters less to me as a Unitarian Universalist what you believe, and it matters much more to me how you live that conveys those beliefs. For this is an embodied faith, and the story of the birth of Jesus of Nazareth is an embodied story. We close with this beloved poem from our dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker.
You have to know your body as the home of God. This is the purpose of Christmas. The rose blossoming in the wilderness is the unfolding of your pleasure. As the fingers peel an orange and sweetness buds in the mouth. The bright star in the night sky is the sudden clarity of your instinct for joy. The birth cry in the night is your child falling into the dark and your arms holding her. The terror of Herod's murderous intent is your rage that would prefer death to change. The singing angel is your voice at church, not always sure of the tune, but certain for a moment that there is glory. The animals breathing their warm breath in the fragile stable are your emotions kneeling into the body of earth, at ease in the presence of God. Mary is you, God in your body. Joseph is you, sheltering God in the world. This is the key to the mystery. The Word became flesh. We are the dwelling place. Through our tears and through our laughter, sometimes at the same time, may we make space for one another's grief and one another's joy, that we may too experience more healing and more wholeness this holiday season. May we remember that this is so. We are the dwelling place. Salam, Shalom, Ashe, Namaste, Amen, and blessed be. Let us sit together in the quiet for a while, even as the sounds of life may go on in and around us. Let your body be still, your mind as quiet as it can be, your breath at your own easy pace. And in a little while, you'll hear the flute and the harp, and then you'll be invited to slowly return your attention to this room. For now, just let go of all the last-minute to-dos and sink into the very real possibility you have already done enough. That we already are enough. And let us lean into the wonders of this love as we prepare ourselves to pass the light to one another in a little while.
On this night, when hope is reborn and the miracle of peace might be within reach, and joy may resound and even repeat, we bring our worship service to a close by sharing candlelight and singing Silent Night. As we continue to darken the room, we can begin to notice just how little light a single flame can offer. Jesus' life and teachings brought the light of God's love and the hope of justice and peace to many. And like a flame, his message was not completely safe or easy to contain. It threatened those in power as he questioned the status quo, Love one another, he said. Simple, and yet so challenging. Tonight, as we sit in near darkness, as we pass the flame from person to person, let's see love's pure light. Each of you possesses a unique spark that will bring light to some part of the world, if you will but kindle it. Within every one of us lies the potential to be the dawn of redeeming grace for one another, when we make amends, when we dare to rise up against injustice, when we resist fascism, and when we care for one another.
We're going to let the candlelight slowly pass around, and we'll let it glow slowly, enjoying the delicate changes of light in the room. This slow, intentional passing, be enjoying the receiving and the giving. We'll begin in shared quiet, in near darkness. And as the light fills up the space, Maria will begin to play, and you'll know it's just about time to sing. There's no rush to get to the singing. Christmas comes when it comes. Enlightenment comes, if we're lucky, when it comes. And after we're finished singing, you are invited to remain in the circle for as long as you would like. Listen to your inner self. When you are ready, you are quietly invited to extinguish your candle. Breathe easy. Let this happen with great regard for one another and the magnitude of the history of this birth story to which we are connected.